what we want to do today is kind of give you some ideas or share with the audience some of the things that we're seeing from our customers from WorkJam standpoint, and most importantly, to have Phil from Avis kind of share some really progressive, interesting things that they've been doing from a retention and attainment standpoint. What I'll do is first kind of level set a little bit. There's been lots of conversation around what the Great Resignation and how it's manifested into something much, much bigger. And really, a lot of folks are starting to call the Great Resignation to be more of the Great Reassessment. That after everything that's happened over the last couple of years, whether it's healthcare, it's economic issues, people are starting to search for, greater meaning in their work and reevaluating the role that they have today and how that plays in their lives. All of our employees are eager to explore something different, probably more so than we've ever seen, and are willing to embrace new opportunities that align better with not just their professional goals, but their personal lifetime goals. Last couple of years, as everybody knows, has been very historic. A record number of people have quit their jobs, with U.S. employers, and U.S. employers have been struggling to fill all the openings. Just in December, and there was some thought in the fall that maybe things would get different, but I was just looking at job numbers. In December, 4.3 million Americans quit their jobs, which was good news, slightly down from November, but still far above most historic levels. And people left for lots of different reasons, sometimes for better pay, better benefits, but as importantly, and kind of what we'll stress on today, is people left for better balance in what was important to them. And whether it was to care for their children, to care for their elderly parents, it became a much more personal aspect of what caused people to leave. I think, at least in the U.S., where we focus, there is a labor shortage, and I think we hear it all the time. And I called a service organization last week, and for the first time, I really heard them admit that due to a labor shortage, our wait time is 3 hours to be able to get to it. So in the past, it was due to busyness, that kind of thing. But this company, I give them credit. They stood up and talked about the fact that it was due to a labor shortage. I think the major question that's on most of our minds at this point in time is trying to predict how, when, or if this Great Resignation will start to decline. I think everything I'm reading, everything I'm seeing, is that it still has legs and it will still continue. There was a 2022 job market trends report that I saw that they held that 3 out of 4 full-time employees, 3 out of 4 now, mind you, full-time employees are considering quitting their job this year, which is up significantly from what we've seen in prior years. And 79% of employed folks believe they can make more money, find better working conditions and flexibility by switching to a new job from their current job. And I think what we'll be able to present to you today is some things that companies that we know are doing to try to retain those people. So I think the reality check for all of us is that the Great Resignation phenomenon is here to stay, at least for the next couple of years. I think the other aspect to it that, from a kind of a reality setting is, I think we're kind of in our first shock wave of what's happening. I think there will continue to be other shock waves that continue. I don't think this is going to last forever, other than the philosophical part of it. And I think as we work through it, people are seeking new ways to work, whether it's remote, hybrid, greater flexibility, greater opportunities to learn, to grow. And I think a lot of it is greater opportunities to manage their own mental health. So I am extremely pleased that we have Phil and Jeff here to kind of walk us through some ideas and kind of understand kind of what is happening out there. So there was a recent poll done by a group Gartner has called Pulse QA. And what were organizations doing to try to focus on retention and attraction of people? And if you can see, while there are some differences, it is pretty much a even split, I guess, between talent attraction and retention is where people were doubling their efforts. You know, Phil, I'd be curious kind of your perspective on what is Avis doing? Where are you focused on this kind of attraction, retention kind of issue? And what are you seeing working at Avis?
Yeah, sure. So, I think just like every other organization out there, we're kind of doing both. I think the focus has been more on the attraction piece in the last couple of months, or actually probably last year, just because we did lose a lot of people from the whole COVID piece, right? And I think that there's been a lot of focus on the attraction, but also on the other side, retaining and keeping the teams that we do have continues to be one of the important things. The nice thing with Avis is, due to our environment, we do have a lot of senior associates that have been with us, 30, 40 years, which makes retention a little bit easier due to some of the union locations and things that we have. But it is really a big split between the two, and attraction and retention kind of go hand in hand, in making sure that we're successful.
Terrific, thank you, Phil. Talk a little bit about, you mentioned the labor union aspect, if you wouldn't mind. From a retention, attraction, are you seeing union turnover, union candidates leaving similar or different from what you see in your non-union workforce?
So we actually see less turnover from the union group than our non-union teams. And I think a lot of that is also seniority. But I think one of the things that continues to push a company forward to keep looking for new talent and then retain the talent is a lot of the technology that gets bought in, right? And as like you said, a lot of people are looking and reevaluating what they have, right? Our hourly workforce is doing the same thing. Like, what can you give me, as an associate that makes me want to stay, right? And I think that's going to be the next big thing for how's this war on talent going to play out, and how do we keep the teams that we have in place.
Jeff, let me turn it to you for just a second. I know you get a chance as head of customer success at WorkJam to talk to lots of our customers. Where do you find them coming down from talent attraction, talent retention?
Thanks, Mike. Phil, you nailed it on the head, right? I think it's a balance of the attraction and retention, or the chicken and the egg. I think that we're starting to see more and more organizations knowing that the attraction has to be there from the labor shortages that are out there, but they're also leveraging their current workforce from the retention side, having a happy workforce, which absolutely enables that attraction and talents from referrals and working with their friends and family members out there today. And technology has absolutely enabled that, that retention aspect, along with the employee satisfaction, are key elements today.
Jeff, are you aware of anybody that's doing any of the customers that you have, and that are doing something really unique in the retention aspect of things?
We've seen quite a bit, Mike. I think first and foremost is that communication with those frontline staff that's out there, really the entire organization, and they're taking that feedback, whether that be from a recognition and reward standpoint, or even looking at career development and having folks kind of choose their own path in organizations and the path that they want to go. So I believe organizations are really weighing a lot heavier on that feedback, that bi-directional conversations and that feedback to help guide them from definitely from a retention standpoint.
Great, thank you. I found it was interesting, though, in the same survey that I talked about, the one with Gartner and Pulse QA, the fact that people, companies were focused around attraction and where they saw the biggest ROI was really on their retention activities versus the attraction. And by almost 90% of the companies that were responded talked about that. What I'd like to do is just kind of get a sense of the audience and put out a poll there. Just kind of where are you focusing, and on attraction or retention, upskilling being the learning. And I know I'm asking you to choose. You're all probably doing all of these, but what is most of your focus in your company on? So if we could run the poll for a few seconds. Terrific. So we got a little bit more coming in.
Mm-hmm.
So that's great. The retention, I think, is for the three of us, Phil, Jeff, and myself, kind of where I think the focus should be. While you can't get away from the attraction aspect of it, and you've got to, I think a lot of us see if you're doing the right things for retaining folks, that gets out your culture, that the culture that you're building allows people to want to come to work for you. I was talking to an organization the other day, and they were talking about how their retention activities were causing people to come to them to look for jobs, or their jobs open. And these were folks that are already employed. So building that culture and getting that out seems to be a very important component. So Phil, what are some other things from a retention standpoint is Avis doing to try to kind of get the message out about what's occurring?
So from an Avis side, I think one of the retention pieces that we tend to focus on is to make sure people actually have a good balance, right? And we actually try to give our associates more of a predictive schedule, and I think a lot of it really kind of falls into what we call our shift bids, right? And being able to set a schedule for an associate for multiple months versus, week over week, or, day over day, depending on your industry. But I think that helps quite a bit. And I think the continual focus is like, how do we continue to augment that and give them greater flexibility, right? And give them a hybrid approach in terms of, not only being able to have a fixed schedule for a duration, but also give them the flexibility to change it when things arise. Right. And I kind of think about, scheduling and, having time kind of like they have to go hand in hand. And the more that we can actually give that ability to our associates, the easier it is for us to, keep them engaged and keep them with us. And I think that's one of the big strategies from a retention standpoint that we can do is like, let's give them the flexibility that they need for all the crazy things that happen in life, especially nowadays.
Phil, if you wouldn't mind, I don't know if everybody in our audience understands the concept of shift bidding. Could you just kind of explain it in a little more detail? And then how did your managers react to it? And how did your team members react to it?
Yeah, so so shift bidding is probably a little bit more unique to some of the labor unions, and Avis has a good number of those. And what it actually is that it's a set of scheduled shifts that run for multiple months typically. Some will run 3 months, some will run 6 months. And what that actually does is it gives them kind of a fixed schedule that they can actually plan their life around. So what we actually engage with WorkJam on is actually to automate this process and keep it off of pen and paper. And what we were able to do is create an automated process where, the associates had their time to pick these shifts through the digital workplace. And from that, they can actually plan their life. One of the things that we, experienced when we started to show our managers and show our union reps and our associates, was not really from the manager saying this, but more from the unions and the associates, more, what took you so long to get here? So I think that one of the big things that, sometimes we're always cautious about is, are the teams willing and able to accept it? And I think that, most people are willing and want the newer technology and want the newer cutting edge things that are actually out there. And I think part of it is, how do we bring that to them to make their life easier?
Okay, terrific. Jeff, others that are doing some things around scheduling, that other companies and some unique things maybe that are adding to greater flexibility, whether it's for childcare issues or elder care issues that you've heard about?
Absolutely. And I think that Phil, again, hit on a very hot topic right now, is creating that culture. And it's creating an environment where culture and operations go hand in hand. And much like with the schedule bidding, more and more organizations are opening this up, and traditionally has been by more of a part-time workforce in terms of the open shift marketplace of having folks pick those shifts when they want to work, where they want to work, and giving them those options. That creates that culture, right? In terms of, and then it also has a huge impact on, the happy employees, and they're showing up when they're scheduled and they're not having to go back and forth and fight. You're allowing that self-scheduling aspects, and more organizations that we're seeing on a weekly basis are opening this up, this whole concept of this open shift marketplace, and having those folks choose their own schedules. And so I think both, if you look at it from an open shift marketplace, there's another aspect of this as well, as around that training and the proficiencies and skills and certifications in many of our operations that we see out there today. And now we have the opportunity, and the frontline have the opportunity to take those trainings at their own time and when they want to take those trainings. No longer the days of sitting in the back office for 2-3 hours and taking the training, whether it starts, on the first day of their journey all the way through the end of it. They're able to take those trainings at the times that they are able to take those. And so I think culture is the big thing right now, and that's what's helping attract those talents, but definitely keep those associates happy and from a retention standpoint.
Thank you. So this was in the survey we did. This was one that was a bit fascinating to me, in the sense of that a number of the companies that were involved did see the need, or they preferred to increase around pay, whether it's providing more overtime opportunities or hiring bonuses. But at the same time, part of it was there wasn't a sense that pay, while it's helpful, it wasn't a long-term effect, which sometimes scheduling flexibility, giving people the ability to contribute to the organization, was doing. 37%, as you can see, had kind of this flexible concept. And Jeff, I know you've got some customers that are sharing folks through stores. Do you want to kind of talk a little bit about what's going on there?
Sure. This is part of that open shift marketplace, Mike. This is where, organizations see the opportunity to leverage labor across multiple facilities. And those are facilities that those employees want to work. So if I, my home store or my home location is, say, 10 minutes from the house, but there's another location 15 minutes the other way. And if they have, some labor demand that's not filled, they're able to pick those shifts up and pick up those additional hours that they wouldn't if they were only being able to see what was in their home location. So it's really, it's helped them across the board, these organizations saying, hey, the concept of borrowed employees, shared resources across multiple locations, now making it real so that they can see those opportunities and go pick up those opportunities themselves in the qualifying factors that each of the organizations can set.
Yeah, and I know a number of the retailers are sharing people within the store. Are you getting much feedback of how people feel about store to store being realigned?
Absolutely. There's an organizational hierarchy that a lot of the retailers work with. What they found is that there's this other, really, from a hierarchy standpoint, that almost, their employees are creating this neighborhood sense of multiple stores, and they're able to go pick up these in their neighborhood, in these facilities that they're wanting to go work at the individual respective stores outside of that. And so it's really creating this, and it's really expanding, because that, by the way, that also has a huge impact on the attraction of new talent, right? Because they're building friendships in the organization, and they're able to talk, and that brings a lot of the folks to the table that maybe didn't know that there was an opportunity out there to share those resources, both from an organization standpoint, Mike, but also more so from an employee standpoint. Employees talk, and referrals are one of the biggest opportunities that are out there. And so you get a lot more happy associates by picking up more hours, but working where they want to work in different stores that they're eligible to work in.
Great, thank you. Phil, where is Abe? Are you guys experimenting with having people work in different centers, or is that something that you're looking at in the future?
Yeah, so the sharing piece actually gets a little bit more complicated for Avis, especially from a union perspective. But it is something that we do look at with the seasonality of business, and it is one of those things that are actually very, very interesting. I think for the most part, the sharing piece is somewhat limited, but we end up going and using the other three pieces, where pay, bonus, overtime, and then even going to agencies or outsources more. But it will be something that we will be exploring quite heavily, if we can actually share between specific locations.
Great, thank you. So we'd like to do another poll. We'd love to know what the audience is thinking and where some of your focus is on this, to kind of add to our research. So if we could run a poll on, again, what are some of the key tactics you're dealing with to try to retain that labor that we currently have? Great. So it seems like pay is one of the most important aspects to be able to do it. It's absolutely appears to me, from everything I read, wages are going up dramatically. The question, I guess, that leads to me is what is that doing from a total job opening, creating greater openings, or how companies are balancing that. I'd love if people could put in the chat what the other is. That would be fascinating to kind of learn. So we can maybe talk about that some at the end if we need to.
Mike, I think one thing, with these polls, not overwhelmingly surprising to me, but when you look at from a pay standpoint, this is true across all the verticals that we see and serve today, whether it be on the retail side or on the healthcare side. But we're starting to see this bleed into the supply chain and distribution models as well, that pay is that number one avenue to bring them and keep them, for sure.
So one of the things that I think is also one of the trends that we started to see in the survey that I've been talking about is more and more companies, over 90% here, are either employing a digital workplace or are interested in exploring that over the next year. And Jeff, I think that we're getting calls regularly. Our sales team is working very frantically to try to keep up with everything around a digital workplace. Would you mind just sharing with the audience what is a digital workplace, and then we'll kind of get some other reactions to it?
Absolutely. So the digital workplace is an opportunity to have a single pane of glass at the employee level. And it's really focused around communications first. And communications means a lot of things to a lot of different elements of the organizations today. It could be in a digital workplace, digitizing the messaging that's happening out there. It's taking one-to-one communications, man-to-one communications, and taking the Post-it notes off and having a digitized and one central view of that. But it also goes so much further than that. Communicating schedules, communicating work opportunities that are out there, communicating training, delivering gamification experience. And so it's bringing all of those different elements of, I think the last industry standard I saw, Mike, had somewhere around 38 different digital touch points, right? So whether it's a different for an HR or for workforce management or for a training, all these different logins and systems out there, being able to consolidate that into one user experience and really have that be kind of that pathway to from a communications first standpoint.
Great. So understood some of the benefits from an employer standpoint to pull everything together. What are you hearing from the customers around the benefits to the employee that kind of build on that retention capability?
So I think one of the big parts is obviously the communications, but it's really having those folks, and a benefit to them is having them choose their journey in terms of having access to all their data in really the palm of their hand and what they need to do within the organization. And it balances both from a culture and an operations perspective. From a benefit to the employees is it gives them the opportunity to go to one, central location and be able to communicate with all their peers, not having to jump out. It gives them everything they need to know at one point and one access point for them. And whether it be from a scheduling standpoint, the biggest benefits, my daughter works in the retail industry, and that's been one thing that's been a game changer for a 21-year-old right now, is the fact that she can easily, if she needs to come home and see good old dad, that she's able to put that shift out there and offer those shifts to them and not having to, text friends, or worst cases, leave those shifts unfilled to the organization, leaving the organization short staffed. So I do believe that, the biggest element is just from an ease of use and a convenience factor in that culture that they live in today, of having everything that they need to do and be able to work when they want to work and learn how they want to learn as well.
Well, I know you were a major influence at Avis in the adoption of a digital workplace suite. Can you just kind of talk about kind of some of the steps, what you did, how you got it out and known, and then some of the reactions both from managers and associates around it?
Yeah, sure. So, from a digital workplace perspective, for us, what we were focusing more on is what are kind of our associates kind of looking for, right? And we kind of approached it more from a workforce perspective, right? You know, back when we first started, it was everything's on pen and paper. We kind of worked, finding managers to communicate, and moving to, a digital platform kind of allowed the seamless flow of information, right? The associates can get their schedules, they can actually request time off. Um, you know, those were some of the big things that they kind of got in the beginning, and then when we saw the opportunity, with, the mobile punch aspect where associates can punch in and out through their own device, it kind of led very well into, I hate to say the time when we were going through the pandemic where, no one really wanted to touch anything. So I think taking these steps and saying, okay, what are some of the things where, people are just naturally gravitating toward, and then how do we actually make it easier for them? Definitely helps, with this digital workplace transformation and getting them there. By no means are we, fully there yet, but there's definitely a lot more opportunity with, kind of what Jeff was talking about. How do you engage them more through communications? How do you get them more information to be connected to the business? Because I think nowadays, when we look at our, associates, and then also just across, our talent pool, everybody wants to be connected, right? People want to be connected in real life. And then people also want to have this digital experience where, they can get on and do things that, interest them. And having a place that you can do this digitally, is definitely a big win for them because they can access it anytime. They don't need to have and find a manager and track them down for things. And the manager has a lot easier time in communicating back to our associates because they can do it, via an app, right? Versus, okay, like, John called me, I got to go find John. Where's John? Especially at a very large airport location. So I think that definitely is a big driver for it.
Terrific. Thank you. The other interesting part of the study, which I think kind of hits on some of what you guys were talking about, is, what were the focus? Why were they interested in looking at a digital workplace? And as we've talked a bit about, communications is clearly the number one driver. So I want to dig into some of these a little bit deeper with you guys. So, we talked a little bit about the benefits of communication and why it's important in culture building. Jeff, if you wouldn't mind, kind of talk a little bit about the channel process, the survey, and how that all helps companies better communicate with their teams.
Yeah, so I think first and foremost is that traditional means of communication, right? In terms of, I think we've seen, traditionally email and text messaging, obviously the in-person parts of that. We've seen it as, taking that, but making it part of a community from just a pure communication standpoint, where you now have these groups and peers, and you can elect to be in these different groups. Maybe it's something when we look at MITs or managers in training, now we're all part of this peer group and taking that from a very simple communication. But then when you take that and you elevate the game and you're able to bring, say, surveys into the mix, meaning that we're able to go out and query individuals from a very targeted, segmented opportunity based upon different attributes that you're able to define, right? So now you're able to not just gather that feedback, but very targeted feedback. It could be anything from based upon, role, position, skill, certifications, but also tenure and those other elements that follow them through their journey through the organization, and getting that feedback and using it. We have organizations that actually use that to determine some of the uniform colors, like new uniforms that are coming out. And they're garnering that feedback directly from surveys, and they're using it to make it in their operations, and they're seeing it real. And that gives a lot of power, or at least an opportunity to feel that they have equity in the company and that the company is listening to them with that bi-directional feedback, but also from a survey standpoint. And then we have, from a channels, we've seen channels grow, Mike, exponentially, and we look at the traction in there. And so a channel is an opportunity to have, a very direct, almost social media aspect to these organizations, that they feel part of the different communities within these channels. It could be a location specific, it could be corporate wide. We're seeing C-level executives delivering messages to the frontline staff on a weekly basis now. And it's been very interesting to see how channels have changed the game, because now these faces that they only kind of saw pictures of here and there, they're seeing these videos, messaging delivered to them on a regular basis. And when these folks walk into the operations, people know who they are. And I've had a conversation with one of the executives that said, Jeff, I walked in, they knew my name right off. And he asked me, how do you know who I was? It's like, oh, we see your message on a weekly basis. And so I think that's where that communication is coming, top down, but it's a different type of communication these days. And it's not organizations talking, to people anymore. It's talking with them, and they're actually able to talk back through the different channels that we have out there. So it's really elevated the game just from a communication standpoint.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and I had a chance to talk to somebody last week, CEO and a CHRO, that was talking just about how they structured a lot of their hybrid work and when people will come back through the survey process and providing information through channels. So you're dead on. The ability to have two-way communication is really critical. And I know you've heard the story that I talked. I remember my days at Macy's. It would sometimes take 2 or 3 weeks just because of schedules and filtering to get a message from headquarters down to the part-time employee. And obviously through a digital workplace, you can get it out there almost immediately. So makes it very effective. Phil, talk a little bit about how you're seeing communications work at Avis, please.
Yeah, so I think the communication aspect, is very similar to what kind of Jeff was kind of mentioning, where you still have a lot of top-down communication, right? And how that's actually changing, and having people being able to reach out on key things to really drive some impact. Right. So one of the things that we did early on was, when hurricanes kind of strike, it's pretty bad. And we've actually leveraged quite a bit of the communications aspects to reach out to our associates to make sure that they're okay, right? And I think that's one of the things that we see quite a bit. I think the one of the components that are also has been a nice add in recent months is the whole chat component, right? And I think part of it is like, okay, you do have a company to associate communication, right? But then there's also a lot of associate to associate, right? Being able to allowing them to create things that interest them and have them share different experiences also builds into a lot of this culture, right? How do you get people that really enjoy, I'm going to make things up, talking about specific types of cars, right? From an Avis standpoint, or, there's certain fashion trends. It's just that connection that, we can create, with people that have certain interests, especially when we're thinking about, a pandemic perspective where we didn't see everybody day in, day out, right? How do we still make that connection to people that we share a lot of our time with and share something that, we kind of do every day? And I think that's one of the things that we kind of saw, from the communication side.
Thank you. Thank you. I know we've talked a lot about workplace flexibility and agility, and but it's not just the front line or those, the people that are impacted that that benefit from it. But more, and Jeff, maybe I can turn to you again. The ability to manage the health and well-being, including mental health of managers, not having to get involved in all these tasks and still being able to stay attuned to who's working. Can you just address that a little bit, since health is so big a deal these days?
Yeah, and I think even what we're seeing on the screen is that you have many different opportunities to have that balance in your life now, and it benefits the employee first, but also has such a positive impact at the operation level, and it's that culture. So whether the managers without the tools today, it's either going to be a stick it note, or I'm going to go talk to my manager, and then he's going to go talk to associate 1, 2, 3, and then go back and forth and talk to John and Bill, and trying to balance out all these shifts that are out there, right? That they were always playing that shuffle game and scratching their head about how to make it work. When you put that control back into the employee level, where they're able to directly release, give up a shift, or maybe they want to swap, two associates want to swap those shifts, both qualified, both have, from a rules violation and validation standpoint, it's a fair swap. You're able to do that in a very seamless manner. But where the big game changer, and I know we've talked about this a little bit in terms of the open shift marketplace, being able to put a shift out there that you want to swap with somebody. So you're not wanting to give away your hours. You just need to trade your hours, say on a Tuesday for a Thursday, and other folks are wanting to, maybe give up their Thursday. So it's really connecting all these different resources. And it doesn't have to be just those resources, Mike, at the one location, one store, one facility. It could go to multiple facilities out there. And so other folks can see that. And so you're really opening their opportunities to have that balance, both from a family and education and that perspective that's out there across, a larger footprint than that they're ever able to see before.
Right. Thank you for doing that. Yeah, no, the whole ability to get managers out of having to make decisions around childcare and school closings and allowing team members to manage that, I just think has been a great step forward, particularly during this process. Phil, anything you want to add around kind of managers' health and well-being by not having to get into some of these administrative logistical tasks?
Yeah, I think the one piece I'll add on to kind of what you and Jeff were kind of talking about is I think the managers are already usually dealing with quite a bit of things, like how do I run the operations, what's going on, how's my customer service. And I think one of the things that technology and that would bring, or that can bring, is a sense of comfort that, okay, the teams are smart enough and they're willing to do this, right? There's already a commitment to the business, because no one wants to come in and suck at their job. Kind of putting it lightly, like everybody wants to come in and do a good job. And, giving them the ability to own it, right, doubles down on that culture aspect of, you are going to do the right thing, right? You have a commitment to, the company, and that you actually want to be here. And I think that definitely, creates some of that, and giving them the outlet through the digital workplace definitely gives them that control, right? And I think that, for our managers, I think them being able to see some of this, they love it, in a sense where, that's one less piece of paper that they have to manage. That's one less conversation that they have to have, and they know it's covered, and they can see that.
Do you find your managers being able to focus on more of the coaching and guiding since they get out of some of these kind of more administrative tasks?
Yeah, so we actually see, the managers are able to, spend more time with our customers quite a bit, where they, probably weren't before because they were tied back, dealing with a lot of the administrative piece. And I think for anybody that, works more from a customer centric, perspective, where customers are in front of us, the more that we can get our leaders out into the business, working with our associates on the front line, seeing their problems, helping them through it, and helping our customers is always a big gain from a MPS and, from a customer service standpoint.
Great, thank you. Well, here I saved for last my favorite new thing that I've been studying crazily is this concept of everboarding, which is, taking the onboarding process and making that through the life of somebody's career with us. So Jeff, let me just turn, I know you and I've had a chance to chat about it a little bit, but talk about how companies that you work with are providing that learning, that development opportunities, not just early on, but creating this everboarding concept.
I think this concept is more important than ever, especially when you look at it from a retention and attraction standpoint. Where we're seeing organizations take the everboarding concept is it starts, obviously, we traditionally have always said the onboarding journey starts day one. Organizations now are saying it's actually day one minus 2 days. I mean, before their start of their first day on the job, they're communicating with them ahead of time. They are welcoming them on. But, just as Jennifer said in the chat, that journey does not stop after 90 days. It doesn't stop after 120 days. When you start bringing in, you look at it from, hire to retire IRs of their journey, everboarding it's more important after that 90, 120 days throughout there, because now you're able to use things like micro trainings, right? We're able to deliver those trainings. We're able to capture interest from those associates out there in terms of the career path. Traditionally, it's been, hey, you've been really good at this position. We want to promote you. But maybe that associate doesn't want to be promoted. Maybe they're very content and happy in their current situation. So now you're getting that feedback. You're collecting that feedback through that entire journey that you have with those associates in their tenure with them. And so it's been really a combination of communication before their first started day, introducing them to peers, all the way through months, years through their tenure with you, of garnering that feedback. And, we have this concept, and so many organizations are leveraging it around the gamification. We're all part of different loyalty programs that are out there. Now the employees have a loyalty program for their journey with you. And so, gamifying some of those experiences, whether it's in terms of performance gamification, or maybe it's training gamification with a concept of leaderboards. And so being able to bring many different aspects that we all live our life, but bringing that to the employee through their journey, through the everboarding process, has been instrumental. And I think, we're starting to see that there's different curriculums and a cadence for those things through that entire journey, far beyond the traditional onboarding journey that we've seen.
Talking to one of our customers, and they were talking about using the task management system to kind of lay out, different everboarding concepts around using the task management piece. So lots of great creativity going on this, and I think a lot of energy coming up around expanding to an everboarding concept. Phil,
Absolutely.
I know you haven't had a chance to look at this, but how are you guys using the learning and development, or this whole concept around everboarding at Avis?
Yeah, so everboarding is actually a newer concept for me as well. And the more that I keep listening to it, I feel that, it has a lot of merit, right? And I think, when you think about a different way, it's the consistent engagement, right? Like, how do we continue to make sure that, our teams are always having the right content in front of them? How do we make sure that they're always feeling appreciated? And how do we make sure that we just tell them that we care? And I think that, you know, it's kind of like, you're onboarding, like, first couple weeks, like, you get a lot of attention, right? And then after that, it kind of tails off. And I think everboarding is probably more of, how do you consistently keep up that energy and do that? And I think, one of the things from an Avis side that we, are starting to explore and look is, like, how do we create that journey ourselves, so that, we do it not only from a corporate side when they first come in, but how do we try to develop that locally from our store teams and have them continue to have this engagement with our associates? And I think that, this becomes a very, interesting concept.
Great, thank you. So I think, we've talked a lot about the retention aspect. I think you guys have done a fabulous job sharing some ideas of what others are doing it, and Phil, you focusing in on Avis. But I know one of the things that's really most important is, what are the results? What happens? How does it, what occurs? And I know that, these are some statistics that WorkJam has pulled together from what we're hearing from our customers. But Phil, how do you measure whether it's been successful, your journey to a digital workplace and all the flexibility that you've added? How do you know it works from a retention standpoint?
Yeah, so I think from that side, how we're actually measuring is, are the associates actually leveraging and using all the different pieces? Are they telling us that they are really enjoying that experience, right? And I think, ever since we kind of started this journey of, leveraging WorkJam and the digital workplace, we have seen, quite a bit of use. Like, our organization, has asked for additional functionalities where, we're, performing health checks, we're, looking at tasks, we're looking at, all these other, cool new functionalities that are out there to really drive the engagement and then also the retention. One of the big things that, when we talk to our talent and acquisitions teams are, what associates are looking for is, or new candidates are looking for, is the flexibility, being able to pick shifts. So kind of what Jeff was talking about, being able to leverage like an open shift marketplace and somewhat more of a predictive schedule. Being able to offer that in that, we can definitely see that, there's a level of, benefit that is there for the associates, plus also for the organization.
Great, thank you. And Jeff, what are you hearing from your teams or the customers that you deal with around the results? I mean, real focus, does this work or not?
Yep. So absolutely, it's interesting when you look at the benefits of engagement through a digital workplace. Where it works is that they're getting out ahead. They're putting the ability in the hands of the employees, right? I look at these numbers and not overly surprised, but when you look at like a reduction in health and safety incidents, right, and whether it's in any aspect of it, there's so many different impacts that have an impact on that, right? Whether it be training, whether it be task, many different elements of putting that in the hands of the employee. So now you were able to get ahead and be proactive, to where before it was a form that was filled out and maybe it got routed to the right one. Maybe somebody else picked up that PDF and saw it. Now there's a complete audit trail, especially around the task and the health and safety incidents across the board. And that's something that's been a level set for everything. I think when you start looking at, success from employees, they're showing up on time because they're working the schedules when they want to work, and that makes them happy. And so I think there's so many different elements that have fingerprints to it. But when you look at this and how they're all somewhat tied together, and you look at happy and trained and educated and empowered associates all at their fingertips, it's a game changer. And across the organizations, whether, like as I was saying, whether it's just siloed into tasks or siloed with training and tasks together, it really brings them. We're seeing great successes at the end user level, all the way up through the corporation, because you have visibility now in terms of visibility that was never there before in one single pane of glass.
Great, thank you. So we're running out of time here, guys. Anything, Phil, you would like that I didn't ask you about that you would like to share about what you're doing at Avis to create a culture, a work environment where people want to continue working there?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that that we're looking at Avis and doing is how do we continue to expand the platform? So as much as we have kind of gone down this path, there's still so much more that our organization can still do. Plus, there's always these new concepts that come out, like everboarding, and what's the next thing? Like, is it going to be in the metaverse, right? And I think that that's going to be one of the things that how do you continually evolve with what's coming out next, and then how do people want to be engaged, and how do they want to have this digital experience from a workplace perspective? What's that next level, and how do you continue to improve on that? So from an Avis side, we're still leveraging quite a few things. There's still a lot more to leverage, but we know that there's going to be even more, and how do we prepare for that?
Great, thank you. Jeff, anything you want to share that you didn't get a chance through the questions?
No, I think the one thing that that we didn't really touch on are really from key stakeholders out there, and how we go down this path with a lot of organizations in the terms of the digital workplace journey that's out there, and then how it starts to spread within the organization, almost how social media, you go viral within an organization. But what we're starting to see is that we're typically, you'd sit in one key stakeholder, but now operations and marketing and HR and legal and all these different elements come into it now. Then they're like, can we deliver this to the digital workplace? And so I think that's when Phil's team has done a great job of, as those key stakeholders are identified in their opportunities, they bring them in and working with not just the different stakeholders, but obviously the different platforms that are out there that those stakeholders have invested in, right? Whether it's a learning management solution or a workforce management solution out there, of bringing that all under this same umbrella in their digital workplace.
Great. Well, first, let me close by thanking both of you. I really do appreciate your thought leadership and what you're spending time here. I know we didn't get time for questions, but I think we're able to capture those, and anybody that would like us to respond to your question, we're more than happy to do so. And Howard, I guess I will turn it back to you then. Thank you to the audience for listening to us.
Oh my gosh, how could they not? There are more questions and comments on this webinar than any I have been a part of. So Phil, Jeff, Mike, you did an absolutely exceptional job. I've come away with learning some great new concepts too. Everboarding is brand new to me, and I love that concept. So thank you so much for your enlightening and well-researched presentation. So we're going to end up here just by sharing a couple things as a reminder. So to HCI members, today's webcast has been approved for HRCI and SHRM credit, as well as for HCI recertification. Your credits for attending this webcast will soon show up in your My HCI profile under the transcript tab. Transcripts may take up 24 hours to update. While you're there, don't forget to check out our hci.org for even more insights, as well as information on our certifications, virtual conferences, including the one tomorrow, engaging your remote workforce, premium membership, and more. And I'd like to say one more thank you to our presenters, Phil Chen, Jeff Maier, and Mike Zorn, as the great moderator who kept this all together and moving. Thank you. And thank you so much to WorkJam for sponsoring us. I'd like to say also a final thank you to you, our webcast viewer. Thanks for spending the past hour with us. We hope you'll be able to use a number of these tools and techniques to help retain, as we see that was the major piece that people seem to like, is retention. So we'll help you be able to retain your employees and attract new ones. And until next time, I'll look forward to seeing you then. Thank you very much.